Hey y'all, it's Dr. Know-It-All. We are Robot. I am here with Dr. Scott Walter, and
Hmm.
I guess proudly showing off our badges from the
Yeah,
Tesla We Robot event.
they
So good morning,
flash.
Scott.
Wow.
Yeah,
I was playing with
I'm
this
not
all
flashing
night.
mine.
Yeah.
We can do that. That's a little much though.
Yes.
So we are here today to specifically talk about the hand and the Vulcan salute. So there is a lot to talk about, right, Scott? This is pretty
Uh,
cool stuff.
yeah. So this was probably the biggest surprise of the whole event. I mean, there
Right.
was anticipation that maybe Optimus would come out. Everyone was thinking Gen 3 and like, no, Gen 3 is not ready. And I was surprised to see the Gen 3 hand. Now it was in the live stream. This is a clip that you got from it that sort of
Right.
snuck in
Right.
that there was no talk about it. And unfortunately, it was over in an area that was like the VIP area. So there was like,
Yes.
and you couldn't get in there. And VIP meant you had to be, some very important person. So we saw it off from a distance. And my first
Oh,
impression was like,
including Josh West, by the way. So Josh West, congratulations for being a VIP. That's cool.
yeah.
Yeah.
But the rest of us plebes, no, we were seeing it from the distance. And I just thought
Right.
at first it was like a Halloween decoration because you're in Warner Brothers and there's like all these other things. So
Right.
we were seeing, the original, or the one of the Batmobiles and some of these other different futuristic looking cars that were there that were from their set. And that's what I kind of
Right.
assumed at first because it was way off in the distance. And it looks very much like the kind of animatronic hands that you would typically see in Hollywood.
Yes,
So
exactly. Exactly.
while everyone was saying it was that, I reserved judgment until I was able to get a good close up. And the thing that cinched it for me is I can see definitely the pedigree of the Gen 1, Gen 2 wrist mechanism. It's buried
Yes.
in there. It's a little bit hard to see. It's evolved a little bit to take care of some of the issues that are there that we'll kind of talk about it. And they've also been able to take, let's say, advantage of it to allow it to do it.
Right.
Um,
Right.
Now, there's a lot of things that are kind of going on here, and it's sort of hard to tell because when you have a lot of movement like that and you have a lot of tendons, there's a lot of coupling of movements there. And so some of those movements,
Right.
I'm not 100% sure if they're intentional or if the result of something else,
Mm,
because you will
mm.
see in some of the videos how the fingers will do that abduction. This is that splaying of the
Right.
fingers out.
Right.
And before the
Which,
impression was it would.
if we go to this, that's the Vulcan salute here. So yeah.
Right,
Yeah. Yeah.
exactly. And that's difficult for most people to do. And it's also
Right.
kind of difficult for a lot of people to abduct individually the fingers. So
Yeah.
it's very easy to go all the way out and all the way in, but to do them individually requires a little bit of concentration. And
Right.
so it wasn't clear whether they would have that because they have the degree of freedom. And we got to remember there's the degrees of freedom, and then there's the ability to actuate those degrees of freedom. And
Right.
so, the knuckles are not individually actuated. The fingers actuated. The knuckles just happen to go along with the movement of the finger.
Right.
And
Right.
it looked like they were probably going to have a single actuator that when you pull on it makes the fingers go zoop like that, like that.
Right.
But
Right.
they have the degree of freedom that allows the finger to move this way, and of course do the normal movement. Now, as your hand moves around like this, your tendon is going to be stretching, and so sometimes I was noticed the hand was moving, and like the other fingers would move. And I'm
Right.
almost thinking, oh, that's kind of a coupling you're seeing in there. So how much is there actually control and how much not? But if you go down and start looking at all of these tendons going through here
Right.
and all these
Right.
different bundles, there's a lot of tendons.
AI is making our lives better and will likely extend our lifespan soon too. So it's more important than ever to take care of yourself so you can keep feeling healthy and young. That's where AG1, today's sponsor, comes in. AG1 is foundational nutrition that helps me maintain that healthy lifestyle and to keep doing what I love to do, including keeping up with my athletic children. Between cutting out processed sugar and drinking AG1 daily, I can honestly say I feel years younger. I've lost weight, my joints don't ache, and I have so much more energy than I did before, which is a great setup for a potentially extended lifespan. AG1 is foundational nutrition that provides your body with what you might be missing. AG1 is a science-driven formulation with 75 high-quality vitamins, minerals, prebiotics, probiotics, and adaptogens. AG1 gives you the foundational nutrition your body craves, and the probiotics and prebiotics help my digestive system stay regular no matter what I throw at it. I really enjoy savoring AG1 since it's sweet without any added sugar, and I can sip it while sitting here, while working out. Either way, it tastes great, is super easy to integrate into my daily habits, and I've really noticed how much AG1 has helped me reach my fitness goals. It's one daily routine I won't change. Be sure to go to drinkag1.com/drknowitall to get 5 free travel packets plus a free bottle of vitamins D3 and K2. AG1 and some daily exercise will be the best thing you can do to better your health for the coming AI revolution. Thanks to AG1 for sponsoring today's video, and thank you for watching. Be sure to click my link to get your free welcome kit, and now let's get back to it.
And
Yeah,
so I
let
want
me
to ask
see if
you,
I
John.
can zoom this guy in. I don't know if
yeah,
StreamYard will show it, but so
yeah.
so Scott, first of all, one real quick thing for a lot of people who have not been
Mhm.
buried in this space, of course, let's talk about the tendons first at a broad level, because there are probably people who are like, what are you talking about tendons and why is that a big deal? So it's all of this stuff that's happening down here at the bottom of the wrist,
Yes,
you know, which
everything's
is
below there.
replicating the human hand, which has
Yes,
lots of
yes,
tendons.
yes. And I think Elon used the analogy of it's like, you know, puppet strings. So
Yes.
so basically you're trying to make something move up here by pulling some strings down here. Now
Right.
it's not as easy as pulling strings because
Yeah.
you know, it's not a direct route through there. So you have to route it through a lot of different things, and you need to then make sure they're in tension. And of course, the
Mhm.
problem is that with strings is they only work in one direction. They work in tension.
Right.
And
Right.
then when you relax them, you can't apply any force. It's just going to go limp.
Right.
And so you could come up with what would be like a pulley system. In other words, you have the string go up and you have it come right back down.
Right. And so you
And
can
then you
pull both
pull on one
directions.
side and kind of pull on the other. And
Right.
you know, it could be we're seeing like the return going around there. But you know, the
Yeah.
feeling is it's probably the way it's always been, that it's somehow spring actuated in the knuckles and everything for everything to pop back into their default position. And when you put tension on there, it causes them to move around. It's very hard to tell because I think there might, each of these looks like a bundle of 4. And
yeah, I
it
hadn't really
looks
thought
like
about
there
that, but
might
yeah,
be
yeah.
at least 5 bundles when you get around there. Everything's kind of hidden. And they're
Right.
bundled in such a way to make the cabling go a little bit better. I mean, I almost think if you look down in the bottom there on the bottom
Mhm.
left, that
Right.
cabling package might be the ones that kind of go up to the pinky. So they almost cross, you know,
Mhm.
like the left side of
Mhm.
your brain controls the right.
Well,
It's
it gives you the maximum leverage because you're actually
Yes,
you have more,
yes.
yeah,
The way, because it
more
has to be
torque.
routed through
Torque.
what
Yeah.
is literally the carpal tunnel down there. So where
Yeah.
it goes
Yeah.
through the wrist, you need this pathway for things to be able to go through, and you need this carpal tunnel. And we can see they built something in there to kind of tie it in different places. Now,
Yeah.
with your cursor, okay, so around
Like
your
this,
cursor is, if you go up to where that carpal tunnel is, you're going to see a little
Mhm.
cylindrical piece on
Mhm.
both
Well,
ends.
and also looks like a pivot point here for the wrist
That's the
across
pivot
the,
point.
yeah.
That's the
Yeah.
pivot point for the pitch right there.
Mhm.
And you can
Mhm.
see a little bar mechanism connected to that.
Yep, right
It
here.
goes down.
Oops,
And
right
we're going to
there.
take a
Yeah.
look at some other images where you will see
Okay.
that bar mechanism is being pulled on. Now,
Right.
I forget to bring up an image of the current Optimus, but a lot of us are probably familiar with the wrist mechanism of the current Optimus. Is you got these 2 big black actuators mounted on the
Right.
forearm that have these linkages that push in and out. And there's like a lever arm that's connected to, and when that linkage moves, the wrist moves, of course, in a particular direction. And the problem is the geometry of how everything is set up modifies a little bit. So the point that it's at is orbiting, and because that's orbiting, you have to kind of stay tangential to that, which means your
Right.
whole actuator itself has to be able to reorient. And usually we see these things as engineers when we're creating these very simple kind of fixture mechanisms. It's lying in a plane, and we have a
Right.
pivot point back here where the actuator is. They'll allow the actuator to actually move along with it to keep it aligned. And then you have to actually, you can't make it a pin joint. You have to make it a spherical joint,
Right.
because
Right.
you've got the motion this way. Things go out of plane. And so if you look at the current Optimus, you'll notice at the back end of the big black actuator, there is actually like a joint there where it's able to move around. And so that means it's position. Yes, exactly.
There we
So
go.
in the far end, there is something there. And you also see where the connecting
Yeah.
rod is up here. That connection there is also a ball and socket joint, because everything is out of plane motion
Right.
to get that to
Right.
work. And so all the forces and everything have to line up. So as that
Yeah.
hand moves around, this
And also
whole,
let's just quickly look at the
Yep.
palm, because the motors are
Yep.
in the palm for the fingers.
Yes,
It's
for
like
this
you're
one.
wearing a big mitten. You know, it's very
Right,
thick.
right. And
Yeah.
and basically those were set up that they would reel it in. Okay. So
Mhm.
they were reeling in what were very tiny tendons going through here. So the length of those
Right.
tendons was just running from the fingertips down to one of the actuators that was in here.
Right.
Oh, so actually, I think the actuators were in the vertical direction, I guess you could say. So they were
Well, like,
going down the palm, right?
yeah, like
So
this. Yeah.
but they were kind of pulling, they were winding it in that way,
Right.
and then the springs were allowing it to go out. So now, by moving all those into the forearm, you give yourself more space in the palm. But
Way
now
down
the
here.
space in the
Yeah.
palm is taken up by all the tendons running through there.
Right.
Now, I just
But
want to
again,
focus.
very much mimicking human
Yes,
biology,
yes,
right?
yes.
That's how we do.
Now,
So yeah.
now I just want to focus for a second on the big black cylinders back in the forearm, because
Yeah.
those things
Yeah.
are moving around.
Uh-huh.
And we're going to see as we go in there, as they change that connecting rod mechanism a little bit, and it's actually made up of two pieces. So this connecting
Right.
rod mechanism, you could also consider, excuse me, a 3-bar mechanism.
Right.
They're going to more of a 4-bar mechanism approach, in that they have a linkage going to another linkage.
Mm-hmm.
So the connecting rod coming out of here, or I guess you could say the piston that's coming out,
Mm-hmm.
that's still going to go straight, and it's always going to be going in the same direction. And then it's got a connecting piece that's going from there out to the wrist. And by doing that, they're able to get these things in tighter, and they don't move. You don't have to worry about them moving around, but you need to add like another piece of complexity to be able to do it. And we can see that on the backside when you go around. So we're going to see that as we look at that. And then when we get to the actual servo stack. So if you have 16 or well, we counted at least, there's probably 20 tendons or more in there.
Yeah.
If you get 20 tendons, what's on either end of the tendon?
Well, I mean, there's got to be some sort of actuator. Well, at the one end is probably
on one end. One end is potted. Yep.
Yeah.
And the other end is connected to something which is going to pull on the thing. And the question is, what's pulling on it? Is it a rotary actuator or is it a linear actuator? And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go and share now, since I keep on like moving my cursor, realizing it's not getting recorded on your end. So
exactly.
I'm going to go ahead and try to share my screen right now. And we will go ahead and get the window here. And so what I did is I grabbed a bunch of stuff, and my inbox was exploding with everyone saying, "Do you see this video? Do you see this video? Do you see this video?" Everyone wants the outtake.
Sorry it took a while, folks, but we were busy the last couple of days.
Yes. And I wanted to, because first I wanted to make sure my reaction was a proper reaction. It wasn't like, oh, that's a fake animatronic hand, nothing there. It turned out to be wrong. So here we go. This is from the live stream, somewhere in the live stream at like an hour and 26 minutes. You see this thing kind of inaccuracy just going around, and no one, our backs were probably to it because we were there.
We were looking at the cyber cab. Yeah, exactly.
Right. And then eventually, now this is the one from like Dirty Tusk. Somehow he managed to get into the VIP area. He just said, I'm not taking no for an answer. And he just went ahead there and shot this. And so we'll go ahead and run this. And this is where we can get to see some good movement on there. So we can see the thumb moving.
Is really cool. That's very different from the rest. But anyway,
and the pinky has this other one, which is like, I'm going to try to get into what's the reason for that. But now we can see it actuating around there, and we can see a lot of the tendons going through there and how they get routed, how they kind of cross each other to go from one location to another. And I think we might see an image or two here of, I'm just going to stop this for a second. So I got this arrow in here for a second. Right here and right there is where we can see the pitch mechanism that allows it to flop up and down. And now you see it makes a really nice gap, which this is the carpal tunnel that allows them to route these things in. Okay. Now, it's finally clenching. And a lot of the times it looks to me like it's playing guitar.
I was actually the reason my voice is so trashed is I went to see Modern English last night, which was a lot of fun, by the way. But watching the guitarist play is so thinking about that. So.
Now we're going to just begin to see it. So right here, where I talked about earlier, right there, you get that. Now right here, you've got a connecting rod that's coming down to where the actual actuator is down here.
Right.
And we'll probably end up seeing that. And when we see that, I'm just going to go back. I think it turns around at some point. So this whole assembly is able to rotate. So basically back at the elbow.
Can I ask a question, Scott? Because it looks to me like a bicycle cable, like the old school bike.
Exactly.
It looks like it's actually there's a sheath and then there's a
sheath. And by the way, your tendons are sheathed too.
Yeah, of course, because otherwise
you have sheathing in there, and tendonitis is
when it gets inflamed. Yeah, so there you go.
When it gets inflamed. So I'm gonna try to. The reason I put it in Camtasia,
I think it actually does a Texas Longhorn salute too at one point. So a lot of very dexterous finger movement.
I think we can see a little bit right here. It's going to be hard. I'm trying to grab it. So if I go back and forth, you can see right here, that's this connecting bar mechanism I'm talking about.
Right.
That connects
Right.
in there, that goes up and down, and back down here is something. You're going to see it's got a pivot point here and a pivot point there, because there's the rod that goes up and down in this assembly, and that assembly is now fixed, because that was
Yeah.
one of the problems they wanted to
Can
try
you
to
zoom that
solve.
back out again? That's really, really small.
Oh yeah, how did
Yeah,
it
it got like it's got shrunk
there
somehow.
we go. Yeah, something accidentally got bumped. So I want everyone to kind of look down there if we can see it, and I think we're going to see a couple other images on there as well, where you can
Right.
see it is vertically going. So that is how the wrist is. So the wrist is an evolution, all right? And they've used kind of that lever arm, the fact that you pivot here, but you've got a connecting here that allows them to have a gap there. And then there's another pivot back here, which allows the back and forth for the yarn. So you have the 2 degrees of freedom you want. And the third one is that whole hand rotates back at the elbow.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now,
which by the way is buried inside whatever the table or something. So
yes. So, we'll see a little bit more of what's going on here. We can definitely see it looks like bicycle cables. The other thing I'm wondering is that they probably have a lot of different mock-ups they've been working on. I'm not sure that this is the final version. This may be a very earlier version that they've worked on that they can't proceed on anymore. Just like, just send it to the event, let everyone look at it. Because I cannot believe they would take this out of everyone's hands, that are doing the R&D right now.
Yes.
Yeah. Now, it's a little hard to see, but I think if you look up here on the pinkies, around there, you might see sort of the cabling that goes through that gets connected to the distal end. And then when you put the tension on, it allows it to close.
Right. But we're still talking about this. We're not talking about individual joint control. It would be you pull the whole joint down.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. And now we have also, if you look at the knuckles where they're exposed here, I think there's probably some sort of torsion springs, and it's very hard to tell from the resolution here where that's the case. But
which means it won't be able to push back very effectively if there was
it's
like
just for opening, unless for some. No, I think there's one in there, unless they've got a second one. But that means more actuation. But
that's a lot.
I'm getting confused. It's a lot. It's a lot of actuators in there. So I'm trying to figure out, what's going on here. But we can see they added the knuckles back in.
Right.
Okay. So now that's part of how you get from 11 to 22 DOF is that, we put the knuckles back in, including the thumb. So you see the thumb has the full knuckles and the articulation that's down here. And they added one more thing here, which I'll talk about later, which this is for what's called, I think it's distal opposition.
Yeah.
If I'm for sure. Are we seeing each other? Because I'm not sure what's on StreamYard right now and what's not.
Oh yeah, I can see you're small, but I can make you bigger.
Okay.
Well, here, I'll make it
basically it's the ability to take your thumb and touch the tips of your fingers.
Yeah.
And if you look at all of them, if you actually try to do it with your pinky, you'll notice that your pinky kind of collapses.
It has to squish
along that edge that's right there. So normally you don't think there's being any motion there in the pinky, but it seems like it's there. So they take that one step up because no one else is attempting to do that. And that must also be actuated. And the fact that we didn't call this one here, I'm beginning to think this is a 23 DOF hand and not a 22. I can't really get to 22 anymore. I was able to kind of back it off by saying, well, if they didn't do the full thumb, but the thumb is correct. The fingers are correct. You have the abduction and everything else. And then, this nice little picture here of this raceway. Now let's go and take a look at a couple of the other pictures here so here's another one that was shot that I'm not sure who shot this, but I think Alex de Turville had posted this, and we can see, as I go back and forth here, you can see those cable bundles, and you see those cable bundles move around a lot. And so because of that, they're getting tugged and pulled, and I think I can blow this thing up a little bit more. And this one here, we might be able to see, right there. If we come right on down here, you can see this connecting rod right here that goes down into this actuator. So there's a cylindrical actuator right here, which is basically a linear drive. It's making that go up and down. You've got the pivot point here. So this always stays parallel in the movement. And then this connecting rod goes from here on up to the offset over here. Now, this is the pivot point. That's not where it's connected. There's some sort of offset. So if I kind of make that go back and forth, you might, so you can see where that offsets, it gets connected.
And you can also see behind the hand the motion for the
and when you see it, you'll see that linkage is not straight. You'll see that they kind of curved it to fit what you need, because it does not have to be a straight member. It just has to be connected. But that is a ball and socket joint there. And that
Right.
is a ball and socket joint there, because there's so much out of plane motion here we have to do,
Right.
especially right
Right.
there. So you see this side is probably pulling down while the other side is pushing up to give you that
Right.
yawing motion that you're seeing in there. So you have the same range of motion that Optimus has always had with the wrist.
In the wrist. Yeah.
And you see that it just, there's this gap that allows you to run this in there. And again, each one of these looks to be made up of 4. Now,
Yeah.
so if you look at this bundle, you might say,
Is
I'm
it
not
4
sure
or
how
is
many.
it 3? I'm
1,
only
2,
seeing 3.
You might see 3
think
here,
it's maybe-
but you'll see
yeah.
there's like a companion one. So for each one of
Yeah.
these,
Okay.
there's kind of this, that this is a ring of servos. So you've got a servo stack, and there's probably at least 3 rings
Right.
there, or maybe more. And this one might kind of belong to this bundle.
Okay.
So if we look here, we can see this actuator that's going up
Right.
and down, that's tugging on this thing here, that probably belongs to this bundle here. So you could say
Right.
1, 2, 3 here, and that one's together. And the same thing with all these others is that we have kind of on the top part of the stack where
Right.
they're tugging on one of them.
So
And
just
again,
real quick on that, going back to that other view, well, like we can see it there, but so those little tiny cylinders are actually the actuators. They're tiny,
Yes.
tiny.
And I'm
linear
not sure
actuators.
how they're
Linear?
doing it.
Probably linear.
Yes, they're linear actuators for sure, which is what I was
Yeah,
expecting.
because they're cylindrical.
But I'm
Right.
not quite sure how they're doing it. And okay, so this is kind of like an
Look
expansion
at
of the
that.
thing.
That's so cool.
where
It's like
you
little
can kind of-
pistons.
You can see them going up and down. Yeah,
Yeah.
these tiny little pistons. And we're only seeing the very top part of the forearm. Remember, you can go all the
Yeah.
way back.
Yeah.
So these are getting longer and longer. And so what might happen is that at the next level down, a couple of these go in to
Right.
some of these kind of actuators. And it might be that the forearm starts getting wider as you go down.
Right.
So as the diameter goes out, you might be able to shove more actuators in around that ring. So we
Yeah.
can see like 1, 2,
Yeah.
3, maybe 4 of them here. Maybe the next one you can get 5 or 6, because I'm trying to
Right.
figure out, it's like, okay, how many do
So
they
it's gonna
have?
have-
How
it's
do
gonna
you
have
get that count?
Popeye. It's gonna have Popeye arms, like really big forearms.
Yeah, it could.
Popeye.
So as you get back to the wrist, to be able to do it. Now,
Right.
these are the big challenges with controlling with tendons, is the fact that you have what's in effect like a lot of crosstalk, if you want to think about it, coupling
And
between
also
them.
just really long cable lengths. I mean, the amount of stretch compliance in
yes,
those cables
yeah.
over that distance.
Yep.
I mean, anybody who's ridden a 10-speed bike, after a while, if you don't tune your bike, the cable just stretches, and then it doesn't.
It will stretch. And this is
Yeah.
one point that was brought up by Josh Gray. So he
Yeah.
has his career has been animatronics on this, and we've been DMing back and forth. And he has a
Right. Oh,
lot of
cool.
insight.
That's
And the
awesome.
first thing he
Yeah.
says is like, this hand is a very common type of hand in animatronics, the way
Right.
to actuate the fingers. So I
Yeah.
think it's called like a Bowden design. So it's he's recognizing everything on there and the type of actuators.
Cool.
The wrist may be unique to what the others have. So the wrist is pretty cool, but still the actuation of the fingers are done the same way. And he had a couple of concerns. One is that what kind of material are they using? Because
Yeah.
there is no perfect material that doesn't go through a bunch of things. So if you use like stainless steel, the thing
Right.
is like your radius, if you have to go around things, is that the stainless steel won't curve very well, and it also has,
Right.
let's say, the bending force on that is going to cause
Yeah.
friction and everything else.
Well, you
you can
usually
use
assume
these-
it's a stranded cable or something.
You
but
can use these
that-
aramids and other stuff like that, and then you have to figure out what your sheathing is like to make sure that you have very low friction that's going on in there.
Right.
So you want to make sure all your radii are very large as they go around to make it easier, because there's going to be a lot of tension of everything pulling on there. And the other thing is, like, these things are just going to stretch. And do you have enough extra length in the travel of these things to be able to self-tune or compensate over time?
Right.
So
Right.
that may be an issue, is that is like they keep stretching because they're going to be temperature sensitive. They're going to be
Yep.
sensitive to forces over time. And again, you've got, we subconsciously do it in our hands, is that if we want to keep a certain gesture and then we start moving our wrist around, we may then be relaxing or adding tension to the tendons that are keeping our fingers in a certain position. Otherwise, they will kind of
Right.
self do something else, as we've been seeing in some of these different videos. So, a little bit of close-ups on there that make it, pretty interesting to see what that is.
Right.
I was speculating with Jim, and that, all you want in these puppet strings is like the ability to like kind of pull on the thing or just
Right.
release it. And
Yeah.
you can have these really exotic motors that are basically spinning and have like an internal ball screw drive.
Yeah.
And I think I'll
If
just
if
stop
you
sharing
if
for a
also
second. So
if you play that, you can actually see that the cables are moving
oh
as the
yeah,
tension
the
goes
whole
on.
thing is
Yeah.
going. And
So it's
the same
very
with your
complex
bicycle.
in terms of
When you
motion.
turn
Yeah,
your
exactly.
bicycle,
Exactly. Yeah.
the cables are going around and stuff like
Right.
that, and they're sheathed. And we all know the bicycle, the brakes work really well when you pull on them because that's tension. But when you pop them out, they're not
Right.
so
Because then
good
it's a
going the other
spring
way.
motion.
Now,
Yeah.
if
Yeah.
now, and there's a couple ways to do it. You can have them unsheathed, but then that means you go around through basically over a
Yeah.
pulley and off something like that, and you keep everything in tension. And so you're creating your own raceway. The danger with that, and this is something else that Josh pointed out, is that
Right.
if something goes in there, like if you go to the other end of your brake, so rather than pulling on the handle, like you can pop the brake out like that, and suddenly the tension of that goes away. And that could happen here with your finger, is that if you expect a certain amount of tension that's on there or it's off, and then it hits something and you bump it around like that, suddenly it may go into, you got rid of the tension and you're trying to get in more in a compressive state, right? And then so you start compressing it in, and it could pop out of whatever runway you're using for that thing.
Right.
So that's a concern, is that you've got to make sure it kind of stays in with it, and whether you kind of covered that mechanism in there to have a raceway. And this is kind of what sheathing does. It's by putting around, you almost don't have to worry about it.
Yeah, but I was saying, like in those videos, you can see even the sheathing is warping.
Oh yeah, it's moving just like it does in your bicycle.
It's
you turn your bicycle, and you
it's
see your
very
cables go around.
alive. It's very alive.
Yes,
it's not
yes.
rigid, which means it's very complicated to control.
Very complicated. And we don't know if that is something that they just kind of put together really quickly. It's like, yeah, just go to the bicycle shop and buy a bunch of these things, start putting it in, or if they they have access to something else. So I think that is not the current one. I think it's a very early prototype one, because I was shocked that they would reveal that. Or they might be like, there's already enough the people who are familiar with the art. You just go to any Hollywood studio and you're going to see
if it's like an animatronic hand,
going back to ET, or you go to the Disney studio and walk around there, you're going to see almost the same thing. So it's not like as soon as Elon revealed that, it's going to be like puppet string and stuff like that, everyone kind of knew. It's like, it's going to look like that.
Exactly.
The question is how they're going to actuate it. So the actuation can be very complicated, in that motors like to spin, right? And with that spinning,
you have to turn that into a linear
motion. And then you do it by having what's kind of like a ball screw drive, or where things go through there. So you take a rotation to convert it into a linear motion, and that gets kind of complicated, especially to package and stuff like that. But that's really the best way to get a lot of force or torque out of that in a very compact area. Another very, very simple mechanism that all of us may or may not be familiar with is a solenoid. And a solenoid is very, very simple.
But that's just an on-off. That's like a pop.
That's an on-off. That's an on-off.
Yeah.
But imagine that you take that approach, and if there was some way, so think about what the solenoid is. It's trying to attract a piece of metal down to a magnet, which is exactly how the telegraph worked. Okay.
Right.
And if you are able to control the strength of that, you might be able to pull on that a little bit to give the tension that you want.
Crazy.
But it doesn't work over a long range. I mean, there's a lot of reasons.
Because the magnetic force.
I was having a long discussion with Josh Gray about that, and he was like, "It's a great idea, but there's like all these challenges, and that people have kind of tried it, it doesn't work." But just because no one else hasn't got it to work doesn't mean someone isn't thinking about the possibility. Because to me, it almost looks like I just want something that pulls down and then relaxes and is able to pull it down there. And it's this funny relationship, is you don't necessarily want travel. You might just want tension, and tension will result in travel after a while, depending on what's on there. But you might be saying, if you could just apply this kind of force for me, I will get kind of some sort of movement.
I'll give you a counterexample though. The counterexample is you can't really lock it off. Like, what if you want the finger just to be like this? That's always going to have to be actively controlled rather than a ball screw joint. You just stop it and it
you just stop it and it's locked in. But that means you also get a certain amount of compliance. There could be a lot of advantages to doing that. So when I'm looking at that thing,
it's allowable within the laws of physics, and that means it's possible.
So there could be a variety of different ways of doing it. I mean, it's like, it doesn't have to be metal attracting that. I mean, you could also be using like a permanent magnet that you're trying to attract onto some other electromagnet that you're creating, and then depending upon how you make things north south, you could also have something that's pushing it down while attracting it. I mean, who knows? If these guys know a lot about actuator design, they may have come up with some wild way of being able to get what they need there, because it's very different
Right.
than the ball screw. Otherwise, you want to make it compact. You got to
Yeah.
get the kind of forces and tensions you need, and it's going to be cheap, you know.
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
these little actuators with all the ball screws, they ain't cheap, and
Right.
sometimes they're
And
so
man,
and
that is
they're
like a lot
stacking
of
those
them.
things.
How many do you think there are? I mean, because if there's 4 per finger, that's
That's
what
20.
20. Yeah, that's 20
right there.
actuators. Those are
And then
expensive.
they got a couple
Well, and
other
then
ones.
40. You got to do the other hand too, so it's
Well,
40.
yeah,
So,
exactly. And so the cable management's already a nightmare. It's going to be interesting to see how they build it. Now, the one thing that kind of surprised me is they've gone so far down putting everything like that. The biggest disappointment is like all the fingers are the same size.
Yeah.
I thought for sure that they were going to make the pinky smaller, because
Right.
they're all the same size.
Yeah.
All they've done is
Yeah.
offset it, the same old trick.
Right.
So the only ones that up till now that we've seen have made a hand that seems to be close to the human hand in shape and design is EVANNEX. That they've actually made it smaller. Now, the reason for doing that is just that part counts. You know, you simplify everything. They're all the same part. Everything's kind of made the same. But again, this might be an earlier version where they're getting ready to do it. Because
you can see at the very least they have offset where the fingers.
Yeah, they've
are,
offset a little bit, but that pinky is still pretty big.
Down, so yeah,
it's very big.
Huge. Yeah.
They put that extra degree of freedom. I mean, the pinky is almost like a thumb, because the thumb's got that same kind of weird.
Well, you'd be able to do this at least. It'd be very easy to do opposable pinky and.
It's very easy to do the opposable motion now with it. That's probably the reason it's there.
Right. So, very cool though. Very, very cool. All right. So what else you got for us? I mean, that's a pretty good hot take.
That's kind of it. I mean, it's like I mean, everything else is that it was interesting to see the Tesla bots walking around.
Right.
They marched out, and they didn't come out, any faster than we've seen before. So everyone was impressed on how like the walking looked very, very smooth. It's like, but we already saw that months and months ago, and the walking speed seems to be the same. And then they were highly chaperoned, you could say. Is that we had the flashing green. The staff had like different colored lanyards.
Yes,
I think they had like the orange for the robot guides. So it was pretty clear that only the orange lanyards should really be around it, and you had to kind of stay away. And part of it was to protect people or someone doing something stupid like trying to push Optimus over and say, oh, let's see how you can do that.
But I mean, when I did it, I was able to basically fist bump it, so I was able to touch
they were doing little things, but they were probably like looking like really, make sure he's not doing it, because they were right there to kind of
I kind of held my hand still and let it bump mine. So
okay, so what's going on is that Elon mentioned something about the first time it was a guy in a suit, right? And now it's going to be walking amongst us. What he didn't mention is that it's not a guy in a suit, but it's a guy in a telerobotic rig.
Yeah, exactly. It's still maybe a guy in
Palo
a suit.
Alto, or maybe 100 yards away. We don't know.
Oh no, I think there was a big area that said you're not allowed to go in here and no filming, and I have a feeling it was back in that area.
They were probably there because of issues of lag and everything else. So the voices were the teleoperators and everything else. It was not an LLM. I mean, we were expecting maybe
the motion, even though it was teleoperated, was very smooth. I mean, the upper body motion of the bot was really good. And
but what you notice is that they can only do one or the other. So the walking movement, they're saying it was like AI controlled and stuff like that. It's like, oh, okay, you put the AI learning algorithm in there, like what everyone else is doing for walking. Okay,
right.
So Boston Dynamics has done it. Unitree has done it, like with with their dogs and stuff like that, being able to walk around. And all you need is like a hand controller or joystick to say move forward, move left, move right. So when they were coming out, they were all controlling that to say move ahead. And when they were doing that, they were not allowed to move the upper body. So part of the movement of the upper body was to control that. Then once the bot stopped moving, now they're allowed to go ahead and do that. And so, they were doing all the parlor tricks out there of like having like, the three Optimi going around dancing a little bit and doing the whole Spider-Man thing, which one is which. They did rock, paper, scissors, and they allowed a little bit of interaction of us. And let's say they were being a bit cagey about whether it was being telerobotically controlled or not.
Right.
And
they did admit it when I asked.
They eventually they admitted it, but at first they kind of wanted to maintain the illusion that you really were and get you the feeling of what it would be like. And I mean, that would be really cool to be able to interact with something like that.
Yeah, so, I have to say, this is just to insert my own emotional reaction to it. Was really cool like to actually interact with it, even though, it was teleoperated and stuff, I was like, oh, I would definitely have one
Some
of
of
these
them,
in the
yeah, and a
house.
lot of the movements were natural. Like the head movement was way better
Well, and
than
it
I was
just felt
expecting.
it felt supernatural to have,
Yeah,
not supernatural in the like woo, but very, very natural to interact with the bot because it
yeah.
was a human form of what, 5'5" or 8 or something.
I think it's
so
well, yeah, I think it's supposed to be 5'8", but it
yeah.
seems short. It
But
didn't
I'm
quite
just saying
seem that
it
tall, but
wasn't
yeah,
like a massive Frankenstein. It
yes,
wasn't a teeny
yes.
weeny thing. It was a good size. And yeah, I've been meaning to say that the emotional reaction I had to it was like, oh man, these things are going to become your best friend. You're gonna like actually
Mhm.
care if it gets damaged or something. It'll be like your buddy. I can really immediately tell that from 5 minutes of interaction with it.
Yeah, yeah. And the interesting thing about it is that because there was a lot of noise around there, I was trying to hear the sounds that the motors were making. And they were very quiet, so I was not
Yeah,
really
it was really
hearing.
loud, but
Whereas
yeah,
we've heard before now, um, if it was like in a silent room, we would probably hear more fans whirring than everything
right.
else because they have to keep these units cool. And the bartending bot, if you look at the clothing it was wearing, it had like a lot of holes in there, a lot of ventilation in there,
Well, it's got to
because
blow air
you
through.
want to make sure that it doesn't overheat. So it was rather interesting to have that interaction, and even without a face, it
Mhm.
was like not weird. It was like, yeah,
No,
it
the
was
lack
okay.
of a face was actually fine.
Yeah,
I didn't,
yeah, it
yeah,
was
and
fine.
it's better than a creepy face. You don't want a creepy face.
Yeah, yeah. I
Yeah,
really, I've seen so many of them try to do the face and just like
yeah,
put your focus and attention somewhere else. It's just not
mhm,
important, right?
right, right.
So I definitely like that. I think that what the telerobotics was hard for them is getting like the hand control because the hand doesn't quite move exactly like their
Exactly.
hands, and so
And you
now
said like the touching your nose thing, it like locked out and wouldn't like
yeah,
you
yeah.
know.
Now
So yeah, yeah,
there's probably a couple of reasons for that. I mean, this is what I eventually want to do with a real embodied one to see if it understands it doesn't have a nose, it doesn't,
right,
or if it did, where it would be able to touch it. Now, I
right,
suspect the teleoperator was probably touching his nose, and it was
yeah,
still locked out over here.
yeah. Well, there's
And
probably a mechanical lockout. It's just those
no, no,
degrees of freedom
it's
don't.
a
Yeah.
little bit
Oh,
more than
you think
that.
okay?
And
You think
I've
it
got
was
a
a safety? It was like a safety mechanism to keep
they
it
were
from. Yeah.
saying it was a
Okay.
safety thing. It's like safety for who? Okay, it's like
Yeah.
you're not going to hurt me. No, the other is you could see that the elbow couldn't travel anymore. I mean, it
That's what
was
I'm
really
saying. It
in
was just
that.
locked out by the range of
But the
motion
thing
of it.
is,
Yeah.
the position of the Optimus elbow and the position of the operator's elbow were not the same
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
because
Mm-hmm.
the arm has a redundancy in it. We have 7 degrees of freedom in there.
Yeah.
And depending upon how your setup is, and I suspect there's a few things here. First, each operator is a different size. They're not the same size as Optimus. So it's
Right.
very, very hard to get that one-to-one kind of movement on there to be
Right.
able to track it.
Right. Yeah.
The other is that they're only tracking the wrist.
Yeah.
And if you don't have a tracker on the elbow, you don't know if the elbow is up like this or if the
Exactly.
elbow is down like that.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the thing is the Optimus. So they're picking a solution. So they're going in there and it's like,
Right.
well, we're going to choose where the elbow
It's
is.
just
for you.
doing inverse
And,
kinematics
and
to
they're
figure it back out. So
yeah.
yeah.
And the inverse kinematics uses something that's literally called the rule of thumb.
Yeah.
Okay? Because it's the position of your
Yeah.
thumb is how they use it to figure out where the elbow is supposed to be to determine that. And it's like this 1/3 ratio that you use between that to figure out that. And so what it is, it's this rule of thumb that gets it wrong. So, I've had to do this also with a lot of the avatars that I've done, that if you don't have a
Mhm.
tracking unit on there, you're going to come up with something. So I suspect they don't have a tracker on the elbow and they don't know it. And then so the
Right.
operator was doing this, but Optimus couldn't do it because it locked itself out in that range of motion there.
Right.
That's
You
one
couldn't get the elbow up high enough.
The other
Yeah.
thing is that there looks to be also the problem of the calibration between what's going on. So I think they may not have good absolute calculation. The reason is like the bots were dancing and stuff like that. And there was one time where Optimus did this and his hands collided twice, the fingers. I
Right.
visibly saw it happen once, twice. I'm just like, I know the operator is not doing that. He was probably
Right.
doing this, but it was like, whoop, it was a little bit off. So
Right.
the way everything is working, and this is how Optimus is going to work in the future, is it may not be doing everything as proprioceptively as we think, and
Mhm.
doing it more with
Mhm.
what you see. So if you're
Right.
not where you think you are, keep advancing and going on there. Now, this is the danger, is that
Right.
if the teleoperator and the robot are out of sync, right?
Yeah.
So I'm trying to grab this, and proprioceptively, I'm thinking this is what I need to do to grab it.
Right.
And so I kind of see where it is, and I do that with my hand. The problem is Optimus is showing up back here. It's like,
Right.
wait a minute, that's not where it is. So what I have to do is I have to like, move my hand ahead of that in order to get it to go there, because depending
Right.
on how good that calibration overlap is. Now, hopefully it's small. It's like, a couple millimeters and not more than.
Right.
But if it's centimeters, it'd be one of those things that you might almost be like stretching yourself way out like this to grab something,
Right.
even though Optimus might be in here. And that's why I
Yeah.
suspect is like that those fingers hitting and hitting twice
Right.
was a bit strange, and told me a little bit about what's going on with the telerobotic control.
Right. Right.
Yeah. So
And there's a lot. And I mean, I've done motion capture stuff before, and the motion capture that I am using them, they just drift over time. Like even if you calibrate them perfectly over time, they start to drift. And so that's why generally motion capture sequences are like 20 or 30 seconds.
Right. And there's different ways of doing
recalibrate.
Is the motion capture stuff I've done is using like the Vibe hand controllers, where they have
I'm talking about
full
full body motion suits though. Like when you
but the full are they using
so
they could be using IMUs, or they could also be using like the tracking dots. Because if you have
there's two different varieties. The tracking dots are actually good, but the IMUs that you just put on a suit with the little things, those guys, they drift. So you start suddenly walking off the ground or like sliding or something.
And even the other ones where you set up the light boxes, is that
exactly.
Sometimes they drift off on you as well because they're partially obstructed or they don't do it, and it's like weird and like then you get
and you get a thing where an elbow will go through your body or something.
Yeah,
like, whoops,
well,
I lost the elbow.
not in my software.
So.
I never have that problem. See, this is the problem that everyone that did it. As soon as they grab it, is the elbows are doing like this weird funky thing like that. And my algorithm is like, it's actually really close, even without the tracking on the elbow.
There you go.
It's right where it's supposed to be. It's what you expect it to have. But
there we go.
It's a bit of a challenge to figure it out. And so it would be easier. And you will see a lot of times when there are people doing motion capture that they will have something actually attached to the elbow to get that extra information, because that's very important.
It's usually on the meat of the forearm. You can't put it on the actual rotating joint, but it'd be one here and one here, and you can calculate the elbow position. So, I've got to actually get going because I'm going to have to travel today.
Me too.
But I want to. Yes, there we go. So let's end on that one, especially because you were talking about grabbing things. Because apparently we're going to have grabbing things.
Hopefully tomorrow.
There we go.
Something is going to grab something else.
Yeah.
And,
so Scott's going to be there in person from South Padre. Is that where you're staying?
Yes.
Nice.
So I flew into San Antonio late last night. And when this is over, I'm jumping in the car and driving on down there, crossing my fingers. They did not get the FAA launch license yesterday.
Oh, no.
They're hopeful of getting it today. So their expectations they should get it today. And if they do, 7 a.m. Central Time. I think from 7 to 9, but I think they're targeting as early as 7 a.m. And I'm trying to think, I think the sun's just barely up at that point. So
I don't know about this time of year and everything. And then of course the Europa Clipper Falcon Heavy from Florida.
That's
supposed to take off tomorrow too. So that's going to be big.
And I needed a detour because while my house survived the hurricane, the community didn't. So like there's still no power, there's still no water. Yeah. There's no sanitation, so like you can visit your property, but you can't flush the toilet. So there you need to just kind of look at it. And so since I'm going to be in a hotel, I may as well be in a hotel in Brownsville rather than the Tampa airport. So
cool. Well, enjoy, Scott, and thank you so much for spending time with the hand.
Yeah. And again, so here we go. Look at the pinky. I mean, you begin to realize it's there. You never thought you would need that for the distal opposition.
Hey, let's end with a Vulcan salute. So there we go.
Okay.
Live long and prosper, Optimi.
Okay. Bye now.
Bye, everybody. Have a great day. We'll see you later. A little addendum here, Scott. Yeah, here's an addendum.
Yeah,
so what do we got, Scott? We've been talking afterwards. That Scott wants to
afterwards and realize that because we're trying to figure out why so many are there. So many tendons. Is it
like
16,
4 cables?
20? What is it? We're really getting kind of lost on that. Because if you're 22 degrees of freedom, 2 of them are in the wrist. So now you're down to 20. And it looks like there's 20 actuators, which means, are they actually actuating every one of the phalanges individually to be able to get that movement? And something there just doesn't quite add up. So typically the way you do it is you have one tendon that you pull on it will make your finger close. And then if you have the spring mechanism in here, if you release the tension, it goes
that's just automatic. Yeah.
Okay. So you just pull in one direction and it goes there. The other possible way is that you have a second tendon in there that you pull the other way to kind of open it back up. So you relax one and pull in the other. It becomes more like a pulley mechanism that way to be able to do it. That's one potential way of doing it. But then we're thinking about, well, then they threw in this fancy motion here with the abduction.
So you've got to be able to pull this way.
So you pull one way and make it go zip like that. And then how do you make it go back? Do you have like it spring loaded in some way that it pops back? That may not give you the control that you want. You may want to be able to go both ways, and they may not be able to get the tension for that. So maybe you have two tendons, one to go that way and one to pull it back in. Okay. So that means you have three. Because at first we were lost. It's like, well, okay, we've got 5 fingers total. 4 degrees of freedom for them. That would be 20 degrees off right there. But then they have like this weird little hingy thing on down there. That's like, oh man, then that's another one that they need to actuate. Okay. But now I'm thinking that they basically have sort of 3 for each of these things. For getting the movement on that, like just 1 for this, and then 2 for being able to do the abduction, which means you're suddenly dedicating two for abduction
just for that motion, which is
like a minor motion compared to this. So okay, but if you go ahead and take that and say, all right, 5 fingers with 3 times 5 is 15. And then add 1 more for what the pinky is doing if they want the control of that. And then that maybe is where we get what looks like 16 actuators, possibly. So that might be where the count is. The other thing you have to look closely at is that you had these different rings that were going through there. So you had like the sheath of what looked like 4, and you said, but there's 3 in there, and said, yeah, but they peeled one of them off directly to there, and then the rest of them were running down to the next level of those rings. I'm thinking the ones at the top are the important ones, and I'm going to try to see if I can correlate the movement of like when that goes down, which finger moves. So we might be able to go through, which is what anatomists did like a couple centuries ago, of like looking at the tendons and when they did the dissections, say, oh, you pull on this and whoa, look, that goes. So we might be able to look at it to see, because I'm assuming what's the important motion is going to be more towards the top, and maybe the
you have the least
secondary kind of motions may kind of go down there, something like that. So we'll have to look. I mean, that's a little bit of a theory, but this is just a little bit of addendum of that, why we think it might be 16 that are in there and the roles that they're playing, and that's could be way off, but just kind of the gut feel.
Cool. All right, cool. So there you go, bonus material. Cheers, everybody.
Bye.